Hi, I'm Danea, Shanti, and you have landed at Gather, Love, Thrive. Thank you for joining me. I'm so excited to have you here. And I have a very special guest today who happens to be my big brother. Well, I'll introduce you to him in a moment. Meanwhile, I want to give a shout out to New Thought Media Network, the vision of Robert Brzezinski, Reverend Robert Brzezinski, say that 3 times fast. He had a vision to start New Thought Media Network that encourages positivity and networking and building community, and I feel blessed to be able to have my show on his platform. Please show him some love. His information should be on the screen now, and if you would make a love donation to him, I'd be so grateful for that. And now, we're going to dive right into the show. I'd like to introduce you to my guest with my big brother, Glenn Weissel. Welcome.
Hi. Thanks, Danea. Yeah. Good to be here.
Yeah, so it's like, why do they have 2 different last names? That's another story altogether. I started off as a Weissel.
You did?
Yeah, a very long time ago.
Sorry to hear that.
And there's a reason why Glenn is saying that. So my guests always introduce themselves and their expertise much better than I do. And so I'm going to invite you to tell the audience what you're about in this world. What do you do? Before how you got there, what do you do?
What do I do?
Yes.
Well, these days, I am a coach, a life coach, a wellness coach, otherwise known as gestalt. So it's a method which means loosely based wholeness. So we see people in their wholeness. So when I'm sitting across from a client and they're just having a meltdown, I still see them as whole and knowing that they've got all their answers inside. It's my job to help them find those answers.
Yeah, and I love that. And that's a common theme, finding your answers inside. That's what it's all about. So now the big question is, how did you get into this work, and what is the biggest edge that you find with your clients that they're dealing with in your work?
Wow. So I love working with people who live with post-traumatic stress or trauma. Why, you may ask? Great question. Because I live with post-traumatic stress, and I have my entire life. I mean, since the earliest days of my life, before you were around, I've heard many stories from our mom about how I would cry every time our dad walked into the room.
Yeah.
And that came from either physical slapping or scaring me with noise. And that was because of his own, call it the mishigas of Dad, of Richard. You know, his own childhood was fraught with trauma, and he was never able to resolve that.
Right.
And he took out all his fears on me.
Yeah. It was terrifying living with Dad.
Yeah.
I'll just right up front, terrifying living with that man. And I love how you framed it, though, because a lot of people have a habit of blaming their parents for their trauma, which is different than understanding our parents were in trauma. They brought that to the, under the roof that we grew up in, and that we have understanding that they were in trauma and they didn't have any resolve. Therefore, we ended up in trauma because of the result of that coming into our space. Yeah.
7 years, 7 generations of trauma, known as epigenetics, is what we carry in our bodies. So consider our grandparents, both on our dad's side and our mom's side, their parents. So you go 7 generations back. Epigenetics has proven that we carry 7 generations worth of stuff in our body. And so it's not only what we experience in this lifetime, it's coming from the past.
Can you explain that a little bit more? Because epigenetics is a real hot word right now, and it is at the core of everything, but not everyone understands what that word means and how it is that we're carrying trauma in our body.
So I'm not the expert about epigenetics, but I can say that based on readings and research that I've done and learning it through our course, which we'll get into in a little while, research was done on mice, and the researchers showed through several generations of mice, if they stimulated a mouse, they could see it firing in their brains and their cells. And then if they provided the same stimulus to that children of that mouse, the children had the same reaction, even though they didn't have the same experience. It carried through the genes.
Yeah. So because we're biological beings and you're talking about 7 generations back, the biology is still with us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Much. Yeah.
Right. It's not like I came, like I came from a cat. Like I came from a lineage of human beings.
Yeah.
So what do we do with that? I mean, all that trauma is in our bodies. Say more about that. How do we, I know how I live with that, and it's not pleasant.
Right.
Say more about it.
Okay. So trauma happens at the moment of a traumatic experience. I mean, it's the only way I could put it. So a car accident, as an example, can be traumatic for anyone in the car, passengers as well as the driver. It could be equally traumatic for someone witnessing that. Which reminds me of when I was in grade school, walking back home from school one afternoon. I was waiting for a light to change from red to green in Brooklyn. There was a UPS truck. This memory I haven't thought about in years, and it just came flashing in. It was the driver and his helper, who was standing, not sitting, but he's standing, and the driver slammed on the brakes for some reason, and I watched the other guy fly through the windshield. I mean, his face kind of broke the windshield.
I have chills right now. How old were you?
Grade school, so,
Yeah.
8, 9, 10. Yeah, somewhere there. I hadn't thought about that forever, and I'm sure that was just another seed of trauma. So unless there's a way to relieve that trauma immediately, animals in the wild, as an example, a deer, you've heard the deer effect where it's freeze, flight, or fight. The deer will most likely freeze if it's attacked. Once the attack's over, considering it's not dead, we'll shake it off. Literally just shake, because they're shaking the trauma out. We don't know how to do that. We're not taught how to do that, let me put it that way. And it's not inherently known to shake it off. And as an infant, all I could do was cry. So that lessened some of the trauma, but for 19 years, I was in Richard's war zone. So I have, 19 years of built up stuff, and it gets stored in our body and our cells.
You were his target.
Absolutely.
And I feel like you were his target because you were the male.
Yes.
Right? And it's too much of a reflection, a male to a male.
And there's a lot of fear of the son being better than the dad.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man, it's huge.
Yeah. I want to address something. I know we have an agenda that we want to educate and share with people. Something's arising right now, and that is, you talked about shaking it off in the moment. What does it look like? Let's say we have men and women out there who don't recognize trauma. They're not educated to recognize trauma. What can traumatic PTSD, what can that look like in a household? If you're not Richard, our dad, a little less severe. Telltale signs.
Depression. That's probably number one, depression. Or a person feeling anxious a lot and being on the edge, a different kind of edge. It's the edge of wanting to beat the living crap out of somebody because, just because it's a trigger. There's a trigger that happens, and like, I gotta take it out on somebody. Alcoholism, drug use, both of which I have a lot of experience with. Years ago, I've been clean and sober for many years. I forget, 30 years, something like that. So how that looks in a household: children are frightened, the parents are frightened, lack of communication, depression, suicide in the most extreme cases.
And why do we turn, as a race, why do we turn to drugs and alcohol or anything that can soothe? Why do we do that?
Well, it's mostly to numb us, really, because my own experience and most people's experience, we don't want to feel the pain anymore. And so how do we not feel pain? Alcohol is the quickest thing that we can do. Drugs are readily available, whether it's prescription drugs or on the street drugs.
And I think any addictive behavior has a trauma base to it, like even food addiction, right? Or sex addiction.
True.
It's all
Yeah.
we're trying to soothe or numb out or get out of our bodies so we don't have to live in the meat suit that's got all kinds of pain in it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Okay. That's very insightful. I just think it's helpful to take it to your everyday person who may not be versed in the world of trauma. You know, like, what does that even mean? How do you know someone's in trauma? Yeah.
I think it's listening, paying attention, seeing if if someone is feeling anxious all the time, there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
You know, we're not wired to be walking around as an anxious person, although there's a lot of anxiety in the world these days, especially coming out of COVID and politics. You know, just a lot of different things can cause anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah.
And walking around in that state all the time, you know, there's a nervousness to that. There's a buzz. It's like a caffeine buzz, but not in a good way. It's like paranoia is another symptom of all of that. And it just goes on. And people who live in that state a lot or most of the time, that's their norm.
Yeah.
So they don't know anything else.
Right. They think that that's the way life is.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It's not. It's what the wiring is doing. So now I know, like animals, we're not trained to shake it off.
Yeah.
We can, like if something totally triggers me, I know I could do the shake and shudder as much as I want.
Yeah.
But long term, what do I do? Like, what are some of the tools you use? What do you do as a gestalt coach?
Yeah, great question. So I sit literally across from a client, check in, ask the client to check into their bodies after they get settled in, because you know they could be coming from who knows what.
Yeah.
So the first thing they need to do is check in with their bodies. How are they feeling in the moment? And they may have a preconceived idea of what it is that they want to work on, which is great. And I also know to be present and in the moment, anything can come up.
Yeah.
So whatever they thought that they're coming in to work on may never get to in a session, because something else is more immediate that they really need to focus on in that time. We can always get back to the other thing, you know, whether it's in that session or another session. But checking with the body, because somatics is huge. We are very good at telling how relaxed or not relaxed we are. And I'm also very empathic, and I've learned and intuitive, and I've learned and trained myself to understand if I'm sitting across from somebody and I felt fine before they walked in, and then they walk in and my stomach's fluttering, and I know I'm good. There's something going on across from me. So I'll ask the person, check in. What's happening in your body right now? What are you noticing? You know, I'm kind of experiencing this. Are you experiencing that? What can you tell me about that? So body awareness is huge. And then we start going into some, what I call gestalty things, which is the toolbox of gestalt to help them dive in deeper into some memories, maybe a little regression, something that helps them bring up a memory that they might want to look at. Not necessary, but if they need to release some energy about something, they need to have an understanding of where that's all trapped and why it's there.
And there's a question yelling in my head right now, which I feel like I'm picking up from the collective, because I've done a lot of this work with your wife, Ashara, right? Because we're too close to too much similar background to have the space be clean. So what I'm hearing is, if I didn't know more about what you were doing, I would be saying, well, that sounds like I'm going to get unzipped or unglued or like pulled apart. And then I'm going to be sitting in the chair like a nervous wreck. Does that happen, or what happens?
So job number one for me is to ensure my client doesn't devolve.
Devolve, okay.
Devolve. I'll use the word devolve, which means, you know, wanting to crawl into a fetal position and never come back, because that's not the place to be. Right. So as a coach, I'm really aware of what's happening with my clients. I formulate experiments that gets them up out of the seat as soon as possible, because it's not talking about, it's getting to the meat or the heart of what's happening. And so we create what we call experiments, which involves some kind of physical thing. It could be I work with a man who's lived with post-traumatic stress as well.
Yeah.
And we formed an experiment where he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. He was also going through a divorce, had children to think about, the whole mess, besides everything that happened in his past. So
Yeah.
to isolate on one thing is really important. Work on that and follow where the client is ready to go. Because in gestalt coaching, we can go very, very deep, which can take them way back to their earliest part of their life to help get to the trauma. But if not ready to go, nothing is going to happen that way.
Yeah.
So get them up out of the seat, walk around. We work with horses a lot.
Yeah.
Most of the work that I do is with our horses. So it's an equine gestalt coaching method is the official title. And it's a 2-year certification that my wife and I have both completed. We also recently completed gestalt coaching method without the equine. So it deepens our understanding of gestalt, and we take our clients through that.
So someone right away is going to say, do you mean I get on horses and ride them? So what do you mean? How do the horses become a part of the therapy session? Well, a part of the gestalt session.
Yeah, great. So there's no riding involved. It's all what we call groundwork. And it could be something as simple as grooming. We've noticed that a lot of the women clients that we've worked with, I work a lot with military personnel. The women love grooming. They can stand and groom all day long, and they work stuff out and barely say a word. And other times they're talking to the horse.
Yeah.
Just telling the horse what's going on. So that's one thing. Other things could be leading a horse around to build empowerment. So if someone's totally disempowered or never had that sense of what it's like to be empowered, to lead a horse around both on the lead rope and then at liberty means without the lead rope, and the horse engages with the person, that's huge. I mean, that's huge.
And horses are huge. I mean,
physically,
yeah, right.
and energetically.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
yeah.
someone who's afraid of horses or doesn't have any experience with horses, do you ever have a client show up in their arena and not only do they have their fear body and the post-traumatic stress and all that, they're just looking at the horse saying, I'm just scared of the horse. Has that ever happened?
Yeah.
And how do you, what happens with that?
Absolutely. So the same client I was talking about earlier, and he was ready to go. I felt he was ready to be in with one of our horses, Lily, who happens to be a large Frisian mix horse. So she's big and she's tall. And he's also a tall man, big man. And I said, you ready to go in? And he just kind of said, well, I don't know. I haven't been around horses before. So I walked in with him to show, we always do it. The first thing we do is a safety demo before we send them in so they know how to be safe with a horse. Then he stood there and he said, man, she's big. And I said, yeah, she is. And she's also a great coach and she's got your best interests at heart. Once he stood next to her and allowed her to do her thing, which was mostly, she likes to rub on men's head. I don't understand why, and he happens to be bald, but she rubs her jaw on his head a little bit to get him out of his head is what she was doing, because he was in his head so much. She wanted him to be in his body. So she's rubbing away on his head. It was really funny. And I said, it's okay. She's not going to hurt you. And he stood there and let it happen. And then at the end of that session, he put his head in her shoulder, in her neck, and cried. Cried out a lot of stuff that he needed to release in that very first session. And we worked together for about a year. And it was almost always with Lily. Even we have 4 horses. It was almost always with Lily, and he looked forward to being with her every time he came.
So there was a success story there that I want to, we can't mention names or anything like that. How did his life transform? Like, what happened in that year?
Yeah, great. So he did go through his divorce. He did gain custody of his children. He is a firefighter, and he moved from, I think it was down in the Colorado Springs area, to another part of town that he really wanted to be in and join a different firehouse. And he's a lead. He's an EMT as well.
Wow.
He's also an ex-Army. He's a veteran. So he's got a lot going on. And he went from someone who was afraid and on meds and totally disempowered to an empowered, fully, I would say, fully realized being, knowing exactly what he wanted, went for it, made it happen, and all the stuff that he was worried about didn't have the same energy. He just went through what he had to do to make things happen and right for his life.
So, and I would use self-resourced. He sounds much more self-resourced
Mhm.
now,
Yeah.
right? So would he, and we're just using him as an example, we could talk about us too, he would know how to de-escalate himself if necessary. Would that be true?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
He came in with a lot of. He's also trained in body work, so
Mhm.
he understands the energetics of body healing and what it's like to
Mhm.
do all that. So he knows how to de-escalate, or
Mhm.
what was the word you used?
And self-regulate.
Self-regulate. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
both. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, why horses? Because now we're hearing you can do it from the chair,
Yeah.
and you can do it. You've got the client in the chair, then you're up and walking around. Also, you're working with horses. So why?
Yeah.
There's dogs, there's cats. People go to nursing homes and bring a pet to
Mhm.
pet on. So what is it? What's the magic of horses from your point of view?
Oh wow, that's a
Big
great question. That's a
question.
great question.
Yeah.
And in the wild, a herd of horses are totally aware of their surroundings because they're considered prey animals, which
Mhm.
means they could be somebody's lunch, right? So,
Yay.
put bluntly, but they could be.
Yeah.
So they're really aware when a lot of the horses are grazing. There's always at least one or two kind of watching out for everything else. They also have this huge energy bubble.
Mhm.
So ours, about arm's length, we sit inside this egg of energy.
Mhm.
A horse's is 3 times as big. So
Wow.
just imagine 20 or so
Yeah.
feet, 15 to 20 feet of
Yeah.
energy. They're totally you get that.
Could feel
right.
it.
Right. So they're very much in the moment.
Mhm.
They're aware of how we feel
Mhm.
and when we are in our heads or in our bodies.
Yeah.
And they help us to be in our bodies, because it's all too easy when we are traumatized to be out of our bodies, to literally walk around without understanding what's happening inside here.
Yeah, it's like
Horses-
our feet are here and
Yeah.
our etheric body is hovering above, like we're on a tether.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
we're out of our bodies.
Right, because we don't want to be there because it hurts so much.
Right.
The horses help us ground into our bodies.
Mhm.
They also help to lend energy from through the chakras.
Mhm.
If we are feeling disempowered, as an example, so that would be one of the root chakra and
Mhm.
the sacral chakra, the horse will actually, and we've seen this many times, turn around,
Yeah.
put their rear ends right up against somebody's body,
Yeah.
and stand there for
Yeah.
as long as it takes to help fill them up. It's like
Mhm.
filling up a gas tank.
Mhm.
And some clients say, "What are they doing? Why are they doing that?" And she says, "Just stand there.
Yeah.
Just stand there." And they'll stand there for as long as it takes. It could be a minute. It could be 5, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
We've seen one of our horses work with a woman for like 45 minutes.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's magic.
Yeah.
Because I can't explain it, because
Yeah.
the horses know what they're doing.
Yeah.
We give it over to the horses. It's like when I'm sitting with a client, I get out of my way. I allow the universe to come through and guide me,
Mhm.
because I trust that
Mhm.
much more than I trust up here. I got the
Mhm.
knowledge. I need
Yeah.
to know that.
Yeah.
But I trust what's coming through. And then I know when it's time for the horses to do their thing.
Yeah, yeah. So everyone knows that the show supports accessing your wisdom inside, wise inside, your intuition.
Yeah.
And I love what you just said, because we as practitioners, we are skilled, we have studied, we've had many clients. We could easily keep relying on our left brain and our knowledge and not allow ourselves to be instruments through which the universe comes through. And the universe, or I like to say the eagle's point of view, is always much vaster and broader than the turtle's point of view. And I actually want to ask you to speak to that for a moment before we go on to another point.
Yeah.
The eagle's perspective and the turtle at the rock. Can you, we love that. Can you explain trauma from that terminology?
I think I can. Yeah.
Okay, someone who's in trauma, and then you guide them and they're out of trauma, and use that metaphor, because I like that metaphor. Use that metaphor because I like it.
Well, so from the eagle's perspective, eagles flying high, looking down to see a lot of stuff, and they have keen vision, so they can see a lot. that's the God perspective,
Yeah.
right? That's where our souls live, where we have that vision for ourselves as humans and so on. So from the eagle's perspective, we know everything really is unfolding as nature or God or universe intended.
Yeah.
The turtle in front of the rock sees the rock and nothing but the rock because they're so close. All they can see is what's right in front of their eyes or their nose. And as long as they continue to bump into that, they'll never realize if I backed up a couple of steps, or what turtles do, maybe they just spin around and then turn back and look from a little bit farther place. They might say, oh, you know what? I can go around the rock.
Yeah.
And I think that's, as humans, we're so up against the rock, right? We don't see what's beyond us because everything's in our face all the time.
And I want to liken that to sometimes we're so stuck in our heads, we're busy analyzing and we're not feeling what's happening from the neck down.
Right.
That's another way through. So the eagle vision is more like the body sensation and the opening that happens on the somatic level versus I'm trying to think my way through the trauma. And you can't think your way through trauma. It doesn't work like that. And actually, I'm just going to hold your book up for a minute because you wrote a whole entire book about your journey, and Unwinding is a perfect title. Can you speak more about where you want to go with this, why you wrote it, and what you offer to support people who are looking for? We know you do gestalt coaching in chair, walking in an arena, and with horses.
Yeah.
What's your vision? Because you came a long way from being a little baby, being smacked, or being threatened, to being able to take a stand for yourself and welcoming men and women.
First, I titled it Unwinding because that's how I feel my life is going. So, even after 19 years of living within a war zone, and I say that specifically in the book, it was a war zone.
It was a war zone.
The only thing missing was bullets.
Yeah.
You know, but
there
was
were
other
psychic
stuff.
bullets.
There was
going
psychic
on.
bullets, right?
Yeah.
After that, I continued the trend because I knew nothing else. So for the next however many years it was, let's say the age of 19 to 40 something, you know, I continued the trend. So in myself, you know, I didn't need anybody else to beat me up. I was beating myself up a lot.
Sure.
What I was doing was screwing myself down into such a tight knot that I couldn't see, again, past the rock, so to speak, because I couldn't see my way out of anything.
Yeah.
So Unwinding occurred to me as the book was, I didn't so much as write the book. I relayed my stories, but the book was kind of writing itself again from that big picture of here's what needs to be told.
Yeah.
And my life is unwinding, and I'm helping people to unwind their own knots. I think I had a different title. I had another version to start out with, and I reformulated the book because it wasn't going in the direction that felt right to me, felt good to me. But the cover was a completely different cover design, and it showed the brain in knots. It was rope knots, the brain.
Yeah.
That was a design by somebody else, which was really cool. I really liked it because it helped to tell the story right on the cover. From that is where Unwinding was born. So the first pass was, this is where I got to, and now it needs to go this other direction and unfold, or literally unwind. As my editor, Melanie, said, you literally are unwinding yourself as you're writing this book. And I said, absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. You work mostly with men, from what I have gathered. Why?
Life is really messy. Why do I work with men? Because women have a natural way of coming together and being like this. You know, it's almost instant. Oh, I love you. You know,
yeah, we circle up.
You do very much, and that's the mothering instinct. You know, your protectors and all that stuff. Men, you know, we're out there grinding it out, bringing home food, taking care of our families in a really good way. The warrior, the heart, the warrior mentality. has been taken to an extreme where we have forgotten, in general, not all men, but in general, we've forgotten our place in the world through our hearts.
Yeah.
So my mission in life, my purpose is to help myself and help other men remember who we are. We're heart-based beings.
Yeah.
You know, and our brains send us off on different tangents. If we listen to our heart more, we would be much more in tune with what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have the kind of world we have today. So that's why I love working with men, because I've been in men's groups before. I've been involved a long time ago with a lot of really good men, and I learned a lot from them. And I want to continue that working with men, not only through gestalt, but also just to say, you know what, we don't have to put on these masks of being the defender and the protector and you know, all that stuff that shows up in ugly ways.
It's okay to have a brotherhood, a circle of men, you know, and you have a couple of ways that male people can take advantage of that or participate in that. And we have a few more minutes. So if you would illuminate us about the podcast, and I know you have a retreat coming up.
Yeah.
And I'm super excited about that because someone I love very much is going, hopefully. Anyway.
Did you get
plug.
Yeah, so I'm doing weekly men's virtual meetings, so over Zoom, which is great. I selected the men specifically because I know who they are and know the big hearts that they have, whether they are aware of it or not. I want to help them. So that's the start. I want to also open up to drop-in sessions, so meaning where we live. So men can come in and work once a week with me and gestalt and horses and everything. That's in my mind to do. And then also the retreat you mentioned, leading them up to 10 men on a retreat to the H-O-H rainforest in the Olympic Peninsula, state of Washington, where my wife and I lived for many years. We love that part of the world. To get away and bond, camaraderie. We'll do some meditation, some exercising, a lot of stuff, but it's 2 full days of hiking through the forest. And I call it Silence in the Ho rainforest because I really want men to drop in and get quiet. Because when we're together, the first thing we want to do is, you know, out of nervousness is talk. And it's to quiet that. Get in touch with what's happening in here.
And that's a challenge for a lot of men. That's frightening for a lot of men, actually. It's much easier to stay here. You also have something in between. You have the men's group, and then you have the men's retreat, yet you're doling out really supportive stories and information on your podcast.
Yes, the podcast, right. Thanks. Yeah, so I do a weekly podcast. Usually comes out Thursdays, and I talk about, you know, what's on my mind or what's on my heart or what's happening in the world, and I just kind of, you know, riff on it for some period of time. It could be up to 15, 20 minutes or so. Some have been shorter, but I just talk about what's important. I think that's going on in the world, and then speak to that. And, you know, the listeners have been growing in numbers, which has been fun. It's been about 4 or 5 months now, I think, I've been doing the podcast, and it's available through a variety of channels. You know, you can find it anywhere pretty much, and on our website, which I know is going to show up here soon.
We will have the link.
We'll have the link, and it's fun. You know, I enjoy it. It's entertaining, and I get positive feedback, so that feels good.
Positive feedback always feels good. We could go on forever. Unfortunately, we have only half an hour, which we are pretty much make the boo-boo face. Thank you. Thanks for sitting with us and illuminating us. And I am going to thank you for giving us all your attention and this time. And we want to give another shout out to New Thought Media Network and thank them for allowing me to have Gather, Love, Thrive on the platform. And you will see the link so you can get a hold of Glenn and everything he's doing, the book, the podcast, the men's circle and men's retreat. And you'll see the link for me if you want to learn more about accessing what is wise inside that lives within you. And we wish you many blessings, and we'll see you next time.